Sound check, testing, sound check, testing.
We light this candle to represent our grief. The pain of losing you is real. It reminds us of the depth of our love for you. It reminds us that our lives are now changed forever. And we light it for our love. We light it that your light will always shine. We cherish the special place in our hearts that will always be reserved just for you. We thank you for this gift that your living has brought to each of us. You are loved. You will long be remembered. Thank you. Yeah, it'll go off. You're welcome. Well, I welcome each of you today. Those that are here with us in this space, those that are joining us over the miles. Thankfully, there's no half-hour delay for you today. Sorry, it's a hockey night in Canada, Newfoundland joke if you didn't get it. Well, my name is Philip Smith. I'm honored to be the celebrant today. As we gather our hearts to remember and share in these memories of this vibrant life that you have each walked beside Ruby Andrews. As we join our hearts together in spite of the realities of why we do so, we come together today that we may celebrate and offer thanks for these years and for the beauty of Ruby's life that we have shared in. We gather today also to honor her family, her loving children, her loving son Scott and his wife Kathy, her loving grandchildren, Sam, Sarah, Victoria, Will, Karina, and Blair, as well as their partners. Her loving great-grands, Nathaniel, James, Ethan, Elizabeth, Alexandra, Philip, James, Olivia, Robert, Juliana, Layla, Justin, Clayton, and Jackson. What a heritage. And her loving in-laws, her son-in-law Marty and her daughter-in-law Marie. And each life that would make up the extended branches that is this loving family tree. We think also of those that would be the friends and the neighbors, the co-workers along the journey of these days. We also pause today to remember those lives that loved and shared this journey with Ruby yet have gone on before ours. We think of her loving husband, Bill, her daughter, Donna, and her son, Philip, along with her beloved parents, each now reunited with her once more beyond our sight and for eternity yet to follow. And we are here today to hear the thoughts to better understand the values that allowed Ruby to care for and support each life that would share the value of these 98 very rich and well-lived years. And as we come together, we unite together so that we demonstrate our care and support, not only for this family today, but beyond today, as they step forward into this journey. Today, we focus on those things that made her so very special in our lives as we take this time to embrace those memories with joy and peace as we remember this gentle and caring woman. Several of the voices that have felt Ruby's impression placed in their hearts and lives over their lifetimes lived are going to come and share their thoughts of her with us today. I'm going to read through the list of grandchildren that are coming to speak today. Just figure out where you fall in that list and come on along. We'll hear first from Sam, following Sam, Victoria, and then Will, and then Karina. Sam.
It's the first time I've needed these. Yeah, thank you, Phil. And if I appear a little bit uncomfortable today, I'll ask for your forgiveness. Somehow, since the last time I wore this suit, it shrunk. I don't know how that happened. So if anybody has a solution for that, please let me know. And also a little bit different than how I would normally tackle this situation. I've had a lot of thoughts about Grandma's life, about life in general, about our family, about family in general. And I don't want to sit here and recap Grandma's life. Stand here and recap Grandma's life. I want to offer some reflections, some personal reflections on how Grandma lived and how that affected me and what it means moving forward. We tend today to use the term celebration of life, and I think, as opposed to funeral, and I think today that's extremely appropriate. I don't feel that this event is a solemn occasion like I have for recent funerals, and certainly we don't feel the sense of someone having been taken away too early like we did perhaps with Mom or Philip. So in that spirit, and that's not to minimize our sense of loss or the importance of Grandma, that's not at all, but I would like to keep this celebratory in that sense. So how do we measure a life, right? How do we measure a life? When we look at someone who's important to us and they pass on, we can say, were they successful or not, right? And you can pick what's important to you, but if we go by some standard measures, longevity, check, right? Wealth, check. Number of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, check. Life experiences, check. The lives that one has touched and made better, check. And the love and respect of family and friends and community, check. And if we look at Grandma and try to sum up how she was, when I think of Ruby Andrews, Grandma, I think of elegance and poise and self-respect and decorum. She really balanced well, taking care of her own, as well as selflessness and charity. So today I want to start by offering everybody my top 10 ways to ensure a long life and routinely defy expectations by Ruby Andrews. Sorry. Number 1, make your bed right away. Number 2, where's my number 2? Here we are. Play the lotto, but don't need the lotto. Number 3, help, share, and give in equal measure and wherever possible. Number 4, there's always room for one more dish in the dishwasher. Number 5, puzzles keep you sharp and engaged. 6, maintain a morbid sense of humor. Death, divorce, and diarrhea should be laughed at. Number 7, dress just a tick above what the situation dictates. Number 8, complain loudly as you see fit about all the things in this life that don't make sense. But know that some things are better left unsaid. 9, always, on day 2, no matter what, throw away your leftovers. Number 10, a little mystery goes a very long way. I have 2 bonus top 10 numbers as well. Bonus number 1, measure your booze. And bonus number 2, finish off each day with a giant bowl of peanuts, pretzels, and sour cream and onion chips. This ensures longevity. The flavor is up to you, but sour cream and onion are proven. This next little section that I want to reflect on is a little more personal. I think when we have a death in the family, it's natural for us to take stock of our own lives and look at our successes, look at our failures, and contemplate choices, right? Choices. We were here 5-6 years ago for Mom. And since Mom's death, Grandma and I really made a commitment to talk regularly. And on the right at the tail end of Mom's celebration of life, I actually stayed with Grandma for a couple of months into the new year. And so I've spoken quite a lot with Grandma over the last 5 or 6 years. And this is what we talked about. We talked about life. We talked about family. We talked about choices and things that don't make sense to us. And pardon me if this is a little bit disjointed, but it's a lot of themes and ideas without a coherent, really coherent set of prose to read back to you. But one of the things that me personally always wondered about, and this is reflecting on our own life this bit, was not being here enough. So when I say here, I mean Ontario. You know, in 1983, you know, we moved to Ontario as children, Sarah and I, with Mom, after my mom and dad split up. And then in 1985, I moved back to British Columbia. And then in 1989, I was here again for a couple of years. And I should have mentioned that as children, we were here every summer. In 2001, Sarah got married in Ontario, and we came for that event. In 2018, Mom passed, and we were here again. Since Nathaniel was born, we came here every year. And so when, particularly Sarah and I, we talk about Grandma and Grandpa, we talk about the Andrews, or we talk about Mom's side, or Toronto, all these words are synonymous for us, I think. And it always felt a bit like there were strong roots here, but that we always were a little bit ungrounded in Ontario because there was so much back and forth. But those roots were very, very strong, and they're rooted in the cottage at Lake Simcoe, and fishing and boating, and the opportunities that Grandma and Grandpa gave to us, and the experiences we shared with Philip and Scott and Marie and Kathy and everybody here as well. So yeah, there's all these things, especially in the last 20 years, with me being in Asia, always feeling like there's this central, or not central, but slight disconnectedness. Bear with me, I'll come full circle in a minute. So when I think about these ideas or these themes, and I think particularly about Grandma's life, and I look at the 6 grandchildren, Sarah, myself, Victoria Will, Karina Blair, we've all in a certain way, and this includes Scott and Marie as well, you know, we have all, in one way or another, with different distances and different times, traveled or moved. And I wondered, where does this come from? Like, what's the common element there? And some of us here have had a very strong and set life plan. And you can see from, say, 25 or 30 to 75 or 50, whatever the numbers are, that they followed suit with that set plan. And that was really to their credit, and something that I look up to. But then for some other people, perhaps, the path was not always so clear looking forward, but if you take a moment and reflect backwards, then that path does become clear. And just recently, I kind of connected that, in a very real sense, we're following Grandma's footsteps. And this is where I hope I can come full circle with this. I think it was 1946. Grandma and Grandpa left Newfoundland. They immigrated to Canada. And whether your reasons for travel or moving are adventure or seeking opportunity or an element of escape or perhaps all three, that move from Newfoundland to Canada, to Ontario, was a real leap of faith for them. And I would say that the distance in the 40s and 50s from Toronto to St. John's was far greater than any distance even from Toronto to Taipei now, just because of communication and travel. And so I feel that we have all done this in one respect or another. And like I said, we've followed in Grandma's footsteps, as well as always had this place to return to, thanks to her and Grandpa and everybody here. So as I contemplated these things, of course I appreciate it very much and want that to be the thing that we offer our children and our next generation and theirs moving forward as well. The final item of my top 10 plus list is the one theme or current that ran through all of my conversations with Grandma. And it was just one step forward, one step forward, one step forward. Even when things were difficult for Grandma, she never lost her poise, she never lost her elegance, she never lost her sense of humor. And she always kept moving forward, and that was intentional, that was conscious. And if we here today, her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and all of our extended family can honor Grandma's legacy, it is to keep pushing one step forward, one step forward, one step forward, and be that giver without ever giving up or giving in. Thanks.
Hi. I guess what I want to talk about is just some of the moments that meant the most to me growing up with Grandma. Just, kind of mirroring what Sam said was that she brought everybody together. We were so lucky to grow up, in a big family that was close. We had a home base, a cottage, we had made tons of memories. But when I was just young, and I could remember spending weekends and whole weeks with her and with Grandpa. But with Grandma in particular, she would just take me around wherever she was going, and it was fun because I was with her. And something as simple as, grocery shopping or going to the mall. She liked to shop. And going to the mall usually meant stopping at Hallmark because Grandma loved cards. She would pick out a card individually for every single person. She would spend, 45 minutes in there just reading cards and having them put aside for people for occasions and knowing exactly what she wanted to say to them. And then she would mail them, and she would write a personal little message and I have hundreds of cards from her, and it meant a lot to her and to me. I remember one time she actually sent me the same card 2 years in a row, and I said, "Grandma, you sent me that card last year." And she said, "Oh, I must have really liked that one then." And, those are kind of like childhood memories, but when I got older, I can remember sitting on the couch with her, and some of my favorite things that we did were watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. And then if we were staying over, then I usually woke up to her having a coffee and doing her puzzles in the paper. And we always did those together and kind of developed my love for puzzles with her. But I guess the point is, like, we didn't have to be doing much of anything, together. It just meant a lot that she shared her time.
It's good.
I always felt at home in her home. And I will truly miss her. And all the memories that she gave me, I'm truly grateful for, and I encourage my own kids to be close with their grandparents, because we were all very lucky. That's it. Thank you.
Our Grandma Ruby. As her name implied, she was a gem, a treasure. She was elegant, refined, and genuine, truly classy. The way she dressed, the cars she drove, and most importantly, the way she carried herself. She was a woman of great poise. I'm not sure if I ever saw her get upset, unless of course it was at Grandpa Bill. I'll always remember her in the kitchen preparing an entire meal with a small cutting board and a paring knife, which was a feat to be sure, since there was never a sharp knife in the drawer. I'll remember evenings spent on the couch with her watching Wheel of Fortune 2020 while Grandpa dozed off in the lazy boy with a bowl of ice cream and Lay's chips. I'll remember all the family gatherings, the Christmases, the Thanksgivings, the dinners, including the episode where the dog ate the ham. The Chinese food for Easter dinner that became a fun and interesting ritual. The dinners out at Red Lobster and Shell's in Florida. Those were a treat. I'm thrilled she got to see how much her family legacy grew and the battalion of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carry her on. She never failed to send a cash-stuffed envelope to each one for every occasion on the calendar. God bless her. My mom was devastated by the loss and desperately wanted to be here, so I wanted to share a few memories on her behalf. She'll always treasure the shopping trips that they took together, in particular the Boxing Day Yorkdale trip where Grandma Ruby outshopped her and outran her. Mom and Grandma spent a lot of time together after my dad passed away, and she'll always cherish the regular Friday night dinners they spent together. If Grandma didn't cook, then she would treat the two of them out to a meal. Lastly, she wanted to mention just what a dignified and generous lady she was, and I think you gather that from the themes that are strung throughout today. She was the salt of the earth, and that's exactly what I'll remember about her the most. I love you, Grandma.
Hello. So I just wanted to start off by thanking everybody for making the effort to be here today to celebrate and reflect on the beautiful life that Ruby Andrews led for 98 years. Okay, buckle up. It's going to be a little longer. I'm going to be delivering the eulogy. I think most people here know me, but if not, my name is Karina, and Ruby was my grandmother on my father's side. I read that when you're delivering a eulogy, you should talk about where that person lived and where they spent the majority of their life. Well, if you knew Ruby, you know that her and Bill had just a few different homes throughout the years. Their eldest daughter, my Aunt Donna, once mentioned that she attended 13 schools in 12 years. So yeah, we'd be here all day if we were going to talk about that. Ruby was born in St. John's, Newfoundland on November 4th, 1925. And some of Ruby's dearest relatives included her older sister, Pearl, who helped raise Ruby, as well as Pearl's daughter, Cynthia. Although Cynthia was technically Ruby's niece, she was much closer in age to her. So naturally, they maintained a close relationship that was actually more like a friendship until Cynthia passed away in 1995. Pearl was married to Pete Tucker Sr., and the extensive Tucker clan was a really prominent part of Ruby's life. Cynthia was Pearl's only daughter, but there were 6 sons: Lyman, Tasker, Peter Jr., Conrad, Edward, and Gordon. And these people, along with their spouses, were Ruby's family, and she thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Over the years, these families only grew in size, gathering regularly for various birthdays, anniversaries, and of course, Christmas time was always a big to-do. During her childhood, Ruby met her closest friend, Eva Adams, who became a lifelong friend. And although Ruby left St. John's and Eva remained there, they kept in touch over the years with occasional phone calls, letters, or in-person visits. And this continued up until recently when Eva passed away. So it was clearly evident that family and relationships were extremely important to Ruby as she maintained contact with the people that mattered the most. Fast forward through her childhood years to when Ruby met Bill. If you asked her, Bill and her started going together when they were in their teens. Shortly after, in 1945, they made the decision to immigrate to Canada and see if they could have more opportunities for employment than back home. It was around the middle of October that year that Bill and a buddy of his made their way to the mainland. And this was pre-Confederation, so at this time Newfoundland was considered a British colony and not actually a part of Canada. Upon going through Ruby's belongings, we found a beautiful handwritten note addressed to Ruby from Bill that she had hung on to for all of these years. He had written to her upon his arrival to Halifax, Nova Scotia, a stopover on his journey to Toronto. In reading this heartfelt letter, Bill refers to Ruby as darling, as he describes how lonely he is after only a few short days apart. Bill describes his living accommodations and the slim prospect of a job in Halifax, and he ends the letter by explaining that he'll send for her as soon as possible. As planned, Ruby and Bill reunited in Toronto. Once there, they were married within just a few short weeks on November 30th, 1945. Since World War II was just coming to an end, it was hard to get certain items, including a wedding dress. So you can't really tell from the black and white photos, but Ruby actually wore a pink dress on her wedding day, and she was very vocal in stating that she actually hated that dress. During this time, Ruby worked odd jobs, including turning their home into a boarding house where they took in renters, they cooked meals for them. She worked as a cashier at Dominion Grocers and as a bank teller for TD, making her quite a mathematician as she managed money, made change in her head, and balanced the books each night. Ruby was quick and very smart up until right before she passed away. During this time, Bill worked at a mattress company screwing springs into mattresses, later on driving a street car for the TTC. They did anything they could to make ends meet. A few years later, on May 14th, 1947, they welcomed their first child and only daughter, Donna Louise Andrews. Donna was soft-spoken, beautiful like her mom, the epitome of grace and kindness. No doubt Ruby fostered her creativity as she grew up to be talented in so many things, including quilting and sewing, with the ability to create nearly anything from scratch. 6 years later, on March 15th, 1953, Ruby and Bill had their firstborn son, Philip George Andrews. Philip was blessed with the gift of gab and was extremely charismatic. With the same kindness as his older sister and his parents, Philip would give the shirt off his back even if he didn't have a spare. Last but not least, Ruby and Bill welcomed their third child on June 21st, 1956, William Scott Andrews. Not to be confused with his father, Bill, he would be known instead as Scott. Scott is my dad, and I can tell you that he grew up learning honesty and integrity from his parents. Like a guiding compass, he is the voice of reason and can make friends with just about anybody. Now you may be sitting there doing the math and realizing there's actually a 9-year age gap between Donna and Scott. If you're wondering about this, Ruby was not shy in admitting that Scott was actually an accident. Thank God for him, though, or I wouldn't be here today. Their 3 children, Donna, Philip, and Scott, completed their family of 5. On October 1st, 1956, Bill started his business as a State Farm agent, and this was the start of a 39-year career. Ruby did continue to work odd jobs during this time, but she was also mainly focused on packing up and moving houses every few years because, as I mentioned before, they moved a bit. You could say that decorating and wallpapering was also a hobby for her, as she would often attend open houses to get new decorating ideas. Always up for the next adventure, Bill's State Farm career provided Ruby and him with an opportunity to travel the world and have experiences they maybe could never have dreamed of from their humble beginnings in St. John's, Newfoundland. Ruby and Bill made lifelong friends with other State Farmers whom they'd had a chance to travel and make memories with throughout the years. As well, since Cynthia and her husband Bill Seabrook were also part of the State Farm family, it meant that Ruby got to travel the world with her best friend by her side. Apart from her State Farm travel with Bill, they also vacationed and cruised extensively with some of the Tucker family. As I mentioned, Ruby and Bill moved houses just a few times. You should know that these moves consisted of houses throughout the Toronto area, Scarborough, Ajax, Whitby, another few houses in Whitby, then Orillia, back to Whitby for a few more moves, and then back to Ajax. The list goes on. But again, we'd be here all day if I listed all the places that Ruby lived. I recall hearing a story when Ruby and Bill had owned a house on the Scarborough Bluffs. After residing in this house for only a few months, they decided that the house 2 doors down the street was much nicer and that they should move. Instead of hiring movers, they took their boxes, some of which hadn't even been unpacked from the countless moves before. They took their portable dishwasher and other appliances and simply wheeled them down the street in a wagon. I'm sure it was a sight to be seen. The Andrews family is moving again. 9 months later, after they'd settled into their new place, an earthquake-like rumble woke the family in the middle of the night. It turns out that as a result of Lake Ontario eroding the escarpment, approximately 3 feet of yard fell down the bluffs, including the fence. Ruby decided that was enough, and the for sale sign went up the very next day. The Andrews were moving yet again. If you drove by this house today, you would see a vacant lot. The City Conservation purchased the property years later as it was deemed unsafe to live there. While we're on the topic of houses, Ruby and Bill also had their beloved cottage on Lake Simcoe, specifically on McCrae Beach near Duclos Point. They purchased this property around 1980 and had it for about 10 years. The cottage era was mostly before I was born, but I've heard countless stories about the cottage, including the endless partying that went on with the Andrews and the Tuckers. It sounds like many amazing memories were made here, as I often hear reference to the cottage. In true Lake Simcoe fashion, the lake was and is a force to be reckoned with. Storms roll in within minutes, much like the ocean, and with 4-foot waves and whitecaps rolling in, you had better be prepared to batten down the hatches on even the most sunniest of days. As a result, this cottage was better known to the family as the Blow-Me-Down. I'll have you know that even as I researched Ruby's life, I was still discovering houses and properties that they'd owned that I hadn't even heard of before. Apparently, during this time, they had purchased a property in Lagoon City, Lake Simcoe, thinking they would vacation here instead and sell the cottage. Well, something wasn't quite right. The house only ever saw one overnight visitor, Scott and his wife, Kathy, before being sold after only a couple of months. Houses and moving aside, as mentioned, Ruby was blessed with 6 grandchildren throughout the years, 2 from each child. Their daughter Donna and her husband Don had Sam and Sarah. Philip and Marie had Victoria and Will, while Scott and Kathy had myself and Blair. This brings me to another important part of Ruby's life, when her daughter Donna and her 2 grandchildren, Sam and Sarah, moved back to Ontario from Dawson Creek, BC, to live with them. They were looking for a fresh start, and Ruby's open home and open arms was always a welcoming place. Ruby and Bill spent a few years as a critical part of Sam and Sarah's life, creating a safe and inviting home for them to stay. Something else I should mention about Ruby. She was very lucky. Throughout the years, she had multiple wins and is just about the only person I know that could lead the casino ahead rather than down. When they lived in Orillia, they would frequent Casino Rama. She could better be known then as our Rama Grandma. In 1996, Ruby won the $1 million lottery through Mount Sinai Hospital. Their son Philip had encouraged them to support the hospital foundation as their son, Ruby's grandson, Will, had spent some time there as a very premature baby. Ruby never expected to win, but was simply playing because it was a good cause. They were in Philadelphia on a State Farm convention with Scott and Kathy when her name was called as a winner. News crews crowded the lawn of their Whitby home, but they were not there. I was told that when Philip called her to let them know she'd won, her reaction was panicked and worried about what she should do with the money and how she could use it to help the family. She was always thinking of others. If this wasn't enough, Bill was also always winning. Not so much money, but things like radios and cameras and iPods and stereos, small appliances, the list goes on. But they definitely had good fortune on their side. Another important piece of Ruby's life was the time they spent in Florida. Much like their time in Canada, they bought and sold various condos on the Gulf Coast before moving into their final Florida residence and a seniors' mobile home park. No longer residing in a condo, they joked that the tin can-like structure was better known to them as the Cando. With all of these moves, you can see why they needed to give nicknames to each house in order to keep track. Fast forward to 2012, Ruby experienced tragedy when she lost her eldest son, Philip, father to Victoria and Will, and loving husband to Marie. Ruby was very much his mother and would do absolutely anything for him. In 2013, Ruby then lost her husband, Bill, at age 90. It goes without saying that she would have been heartbroken. But what to do in times of tragedy? Why not move again? Ruby left their home on Tormina Boulevard in Whitby to downsize to her Ajax condominium. She continued to live life to the fullest extent, always a happy and positive person. Then, in 2018, Ruby lost her only daughter, Donna, mother to Sam and Sarah. You can imagine this was incredibly hard, as Ruby and Donna had more than just a mother-daughter relationship. They were best friends. They spent most days together, running out for some errands, going shopping, going for lunch. At the very least, they spoke on the phone every single day. With death and tragedy surrounding her, Ruby always picked up and moved on, figuratively and literally. That's life. She was so strong, and if she broke down, it was never in public. Ruby got up each morning, always dressed to impress, never forgetting her lipstick, and made a point to get out of the house every single day. As if it wasn't enough, Ruby's long life allowed her to get to know and spend time with her 14 great-grandchildren. I know I speak for everyone when I say that we were truly lucky to have her around for so many milestones and for as long as we did. Even in her last home at Taunton Mills at age 98, Ruby couldn't shake the real estate bug. She was talking about going to an open house across the street because they were newer units, and in her opinion, they were much nicer than the one she was currently in. She was laughing when she said this, but I don't think she was joking. If you look back on photos of Ruby, you can see that she was often holding a drink in one hand and a cigarette in the other, though her smoking days were long before I was born. Huge smile on her face, laughing, always having the best time. Those who knew Ruby knew that she loved her family more than anything. She had the most loving way of pointing out the obvious and wasn't afraid to laugh at herself. She was so funny when she swore, which she didn't do often. She would drop something on the ground, for example, blurt out a loud S word, followed by a whoops and a giggle. She was gentle, composed, classy, smart, stylish, comforting, and had endless patience. As one of her grandchildren, I would know, because we all certainly pushed it to the limits. It's hard not to feel sad that Ruby is gone, but it is comforting knowing that she's reunited with her husband, children, and extended family, as I'm sure they've been waiting for her all these years. Whether we were blessed to inherit some of her wonderful qualities through kin, or we are blessed to have her true friendship,
Her memory lives on through all of us in some special way. On a personal note, my Grandma Ruby was one of the biggest contributing factors in my extremely happy and loving childhood. I have so many amazing memories with her. Like a true Newfie, she was the one who taught me how to fish. We'd walk down to the marina near their house in Bayshore Village on Lake Simcoe. Yes, I'm describing another house, and that's where we'd practice. I also remember her taking us shopping at the Aurelia Square Mall, which didn't really have many stores, but Grandma made everything fun, even the most boring tasks like grocery shopping or going to Canadian Tire. We'd always start at one end of the plaza in Zellers and make our way through to the rest of the mall. She always promised to buy us some kind of candy in Zellers if we were good, which I don't think we ever were. One time we got halfway through the mall when Grandma looked down, yelled some profanity, realizing that she'd accidentally walked out of Zellers without paying for a bag of candy. She promptly marched back, owned up to her mistake, and made sure to pay for the stolen candy. She always did the right thing. Back at her house, I remember laying in the sunroom playing endless card games of Go Fish together. If you know that game, you know that it's not really a two-person card game, but regardless, she always humored me anyways, and she would never say no. When I was a kid and we were asked in a grade 5 assignment who our role model was, that was easy. It was Grandma Ruby. On my 19th birthday, which falls in February on College Reading Week each year, I decided to go down to spend the week with Grandma and Grandpa in Florida in the Cando. Some of my college peers couldn't understand why I was finally turning the legal Ontario drinking age and that I would want to spend it in a state where the drinking age is 21. But if you knew Grandma, you'd choose the week over being legal in Canada too. I just couldn't pass up a chance to spend a week with her. When something good or bad happened, she was the first person I called. After my first real heartbreak at age 23, I called Grandma to come spend the day with her, knowing she would make me feel better. Her advice was, good riddance to bad rubbish. She has the best advice, and I still refer to this phrase sometimes. A few years later, I remember buying my first house, and they accepted our offer on March 4th, what would have been Grandpa's birthday. I was so excited to tell her that the real estate gods were looking down on me and that it must have been a sign, since her and Grandpa had had some luck and experience in buying and selling homes. After my grandpa passed away, I used to drive down to visit her for a weekly sleepover, usually on Wednesdays. As I got older and life got busy with husband, work, and kid, this happened less and less. Grandma understood. However, one of the last visits I had with Grandma was when I went down to see her this past March. I had been wanting to learn how to knit, and so I drove down on my day off, and we spent a few hours practicing together. Her showing me how to start a stitch, me fumbling around, her laughing at me. We shared a lot of laughs that day, but I still can't really knit very well. There are so many little things that remind me of her. Every time I apply my lipstick in the car mirror, I hear Grandma's voice saying, well, I'd better put my lipstick on before we go in case I get pulled over. You know, in case you need to talk your way out of a ticket. I'm so privileged that I got to have her in my life for so long. When I think of the person that I want to emulate, I think of Grandma Ruby. I will love and remember her forever.
Well, I want to say thank you for painting such a vibrant picture of Ruby today. It's never easy to speak about those we have loved and now miss, but in time you'll be thankful that you've shared this time today. It also allows me to better understand that rule that says always measure your drinks. Where Scott's concerned, apparently that was a night where they learned that rule was important. Sorry, Scott. They told me the other day that she was still driving at 98. Well, she would actually pass her final driving exam in this last go-around at 98. Other voices around her would, however, suggest that perhaps all those miles explored, now it was time to hang up the keys. So for one last time, Ruby would hang up the keys at 98. But we're certain that in those years before, when she was still running the roads, sharing time with her friends no matter where she was calling home, we know that Ruby would have the time of her life doing it. Many of those adventures shared with the likes of Cynthia and Pearl, and if there was a version of Thelma and Louise that involved Ruby, Well, Cynthia and Pearl would likely have been in that convertible right alongside her. So they would find reasons to walk the aisles at Eaton's at any chance they were given. That love of shopping would motivate Ruby's gas pedal and the sensible heels that each lady would wear as they searched the great aisles for that next article of wardrobe would. Well, they'd be motivated by those heels. It's still whispered in the halls of the Eaton Center that when those three amigos stopped shopping at Eaton's, well, that's truly when the demise for the great brand found its end. Apparently now the Bay is next on that list. Whether she was shopping to stock up for a wonderful gathering at Christmas, or to make sure that her children, her grands, and her great-grands had that ideal gift. The love and joy of family and their families surrounding her year over year. Or the welcome of familiar faces at the Easter holiday or a Thanksgiving meal. It would be those years on the beauty of Simcoe that would show her in her best form as an entertainer, at least in a pinch. There she'd be sitting peacefully on the deck on a fine Saturday afternoon in July, minding her own business. Perhaps Bill down by the water, setting a new jig for the fishing rod. When out of nowhere, 15 folks would show up on the back porch for an impromptu visit. And while some would get flustered, Ruby would simply get in the car and go down to the local store and buy enough food and drinks to make sure that everybody left happy. Whether it was she and Bill entertaining at the cottage or welcoming the time that they would share in the Florida sun and each winter gathered there. They would love those times that came and allowed them to entertain that family down south as well. And even in these last 11 years, when she would feel the loss of her beloved husband, a son, and her daughter, she would continue to be surrounded by the love of each life that remained. Lives that have shown that love today. That calm demeanor in the face of adversity that would allow her to look at each circumstance and simply say, that's the way it is. She would push forward day after day, as we've heard from Karina. The times with Scott and Kathy and the extent of this family would become more valued with each visit shared. When she was helping in the kitchen, you could always rest assured that it was going to be tasty. Whether she was whipping up a batch of her famous scalloped potatoes or just helping you peel carrots, apparently with her paring knife. You could rest assured that it was always going to be wonderful, and not simply because Ruby had helped you prepare it, but because you know she had taste tested everything in the grocery store before anything ever made it into her shopping basket. That's a reality that has made Scott quite the expert at becoming a human shield over these last few years. She would fill her mouth with a handful of grapes in the produce section or take a quick bite of a sprig of asparagus. And if you were serving one of her favorite mains for dinner, well, say a good piece of fish or some pork ribs, you happened to load her down with a helping of French fries, well, you had made Ruby a very happy woman, that was for sure. But if at the end of it all you handed her a healthy pour of rye and Diet Coke to chase it all down, well, you, my friend, could do no wrong, at least for the end of that evening. Yet I'm sure that you also all learned when Jeopardy or Wheel was on the TV, that was a time reserved for the answering machine. But if the Grands were visiting, she might get a little wild. Not just let you watch Wheel and Jeopardy with her. She might even give you a bowl of ice cream after 8 p.m. so that you could settle in and enjoy another great evening shared with one of those wonderful movies that would take you till 2 in the morning. And even if bedtime was 2, Ruby was up again at 7 and breakfast was at the ready as soon as their feet would hit the floor. And I suppose when we look at that reality of Ruby, who was always ready to tackle that next mile, who would be the driving force in the lives of her family and her friends for so very many trips around the sun, who would give her children an understanding of being loved by a mother, and the value of her example of sharing love with her husband for a lifetime shared. Love with these grands and great-grands that she has welcomed as her own. And that strength that allowed her to reach for her 98th year and well into it, I might add. Yet over these last few months shared, you would also note the slowing down of her days. The things that once came so easily at one part, now harder to accomplish, and some no longer within grasp at all. And when we consider that she was being shielded by Scott in the grocery store just a week before her passing, the sudden loss seems even heavier to bear. You know, there's honesty in our sorrow today, my friends. The loss of these lives like Ruby's that we have loved and cared for leaves us each with the reality that we must walk through and deal with this loss in our own ways and our own time. And for Ruby, her journey would see her walk with us until this Saturday, the 27th day of April in 2024. As the sun would begin to push the moon from the sky for another day shared, Ruby Andrews, without any fanfare or grand pronouncement, would take that final step in this life. She would journey on to know peace. And the welcome of all who she had loved and had longed to see once more. For those of us who remain, Ruby and her value in your lives will still be felt over the course of each of your days for as long as your memories last. For those present who were witness to this wonderful life of hers, my encouragement for you today is simply this. Be present for these that have loved her and will carry on with her. Perhaps when your thoughts drift to her, you'll reach out to let them know that your thoughts are with theirs in this continued loss. To be a comfort and alongside her when those times when they need your smile or the warmth of your embrace or just your listening ear to listen with care. As we do prepare to bring our time of remembrance here in this space to its close today, the family is going to invite you to join them just down the hallway for a time of refreshment, your continued shared memories of Ruby. See, when we do them for 98-year-olds, I'm always expecting a great group of kids, and so I'm happy with it. It's good. But we'll make our way to the reception area just out the back. The staff will lead you there. But in the moments left, I'd like to share two final things with you, if I may. A reading and a song, both dedicated in love to Ruby today from her family and those that have loved her most. The poet writes these words. He says, "You can shed tears that she is gone, or you can smile because she has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that she will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that she has left. Your heart can be empty because you can no longer see her, or you can be full of the love that you have shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live for yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember her and only that she is gone, or you can cherish her memory and let it live on. You can cry, close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what Ruby would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on."